I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset. Today on Pro Mindset, I have Paul Browning, D2 national champion, former NFL player, has played in the Arena League and is still pursuing his football career. But he's also an African-American black man that has to deal with a lot of the things that our society's dealing with right now. So, Paul, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
So what we're going to talk about is just what does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
I think it's something that should resonate with everybody. It's not just a message towards people who are not black. I think it's a message to everybody. To black people, we need to start valuing ourselves, and in the way we treat each other, the way we go about things, value ourselves. And then on the outside, obviously, for those who are not black, to understand the black plight, to understand the journey of black men, black women, and some of the issues that we face and why we go through them and why there's a history, a systemic issue, and just fighting towards alleviating those issues. So that's what Black Lives Matter mean to me.
It makes sense that we should all be treated equally.
Right.
You were sharing with me at lunch today that you've had numerous episodes of interactions with the police here in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Why don't you share one that might surprise our audience? I mean, just for the listeners' benefit, you're around 6'3". How much you weigh now? 210?
215.
215. You're a good-looking guy. You're an athletic guy. You have your degree?
Yep.
So you've graduated from college, and you've had a lot of accomplishments both on and off the field. So you don't really fit the profile of somebody that's a problem. You don't have a record, right?
No record.
But you still have had issues for a long period of time with the police. So why don't you share one of those stories?
There's a couple. One that I usually talk about is just, simply just walking home from a friend's house in the evening. And I actually made it all the way to my front yard. And I'm walking one direction towards my house, and in the other direction I see a car coming, just the headlights. And I think nothing of it, and I start walking in the direction of my driveway. And that's when the cop lights come on, and I'm like, all right, whatever. So he pulls up real quick and gets out the car, immediately asking me, where am I going? Where am I headed? And he's like, I'm going home. And he's like, all right, where's home? And I point right there. My house is right there. And it didn't matter to him, so he just was like, all right, well, whatever, put your hands on the hood. And immediately I was just frisked and, asked me, if I had drugs on me, had I been smoking, boom, 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 all these different things. And I'm also not a smoker, not a drinker. At the time, I'm like 16, 17 years old, maybe. And that was just that incident. And then, obviously I have nothing on me, and there's no issues with me. And I'm in front of my own home, not doing anything. He ended up letting me go. But even that little issue for me was something that it just reminded me, no matter what I was doing, I was the senior at Wyfield High School, top ball player, good kid, good grades, whatever. None of that mattered to him. He didn't care. And me being right in front of my house, there's nobody else outside. Wyfield's not the most dangerous area, but it was enough for me to get grabbed up and profiled. So
it's probably fair to say that if you were white, he wouldn't have did that.
Yeah. And was
it a white officer by chance?
Yeah. I've had it happen with officers who are, Hispanic too or whatever. And I understand when cops are trying to do their job or when they're just trying to police the neighborhood and make sure everybody is safe. But sometimes it's it's past that. And I think it's something where you may be looking at me like an opportunity for, I may get somebody today. He's walking around, he may be selling drugs, boom, boom, and I'm just living my life. I'm just walking home from school, or walking home with a friend, or I'm riding in the car with my brothers, or I'm with my mom, and that can happen. I mean, I've had about 5 different encounters with police where, it just was profiled, and I didn't have anything to do with it, with any type of issues or anything. I was just living, just being black. So,
a lot of pro athletes talk about the talk, where their parents sit them down and say, "Hey, you got to be careful. You have to keep your hands out of your pocket when you're in a store. You have to make sure that you don't act suspicious when you're in a store and you've got people's eyes on you, or hidden cameras, or whatever the case may be." Did your parents ever have the talk with you?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, it's funny because I remember being like 8 years old, and there's a movie called Shaft came out, and Shaft is a black police officer. And so I watched that movie. Samuel Jackson's in it, and it's like really engaging. It's a super cool movie. Probably not for an 8-year-old, but whatever. I watched it anyway. So I was like, yeah, like, oh, this is pretty cool, like being a cop or something like that. And it just was one of those realities where parents were kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's great, but you do need to understand that you're not really an ally to the police. Then they don't see you like that. Especially, you're going to get bigger, you're going to get stronger, and you're going to become a threat to the police. And it's uncomfortable because I'm just a kid who just, any other kid, you got kids. Imagine telling JoJo maybe the cop thing is not for you. I don't know if that's something where, your relationship with cops is not there. No matter what you do, it's just not there. There's too much of a history there. So part one of it was, just talking and going, you have to be careful because the way that you look to people is not the same the way you view yourself. So I had to deal with that. And then just to piggyback off of that, what put it into action for me was I was about 9 years old, so about a year later, and I'm riding home with my older brother, who is about 15, 16, it's about 16 years old, and he's driving. My dad is in the passenger seat, and then my middle brother is sitting next to me in the back seat. And we're driving from the movies. We've seen a movie. Obviously, this cop sees us at a stop sign or at a stoplight. We don't pay him any attention, but my dad, who is pretty smart and seeing what's going on, can see that the cop is noticing us and notices there's just 4 black males in a vehicle in an older car. And we start driving, and immediately he puts his lights on and pulls us over. And without any question or anything, he just asks for, one, he doesn't come all the way up to the door. He's knocking on the window, and then his buddy comes up and puts his foot on the door so my dad can't get out. And then I guess he probably thought we were all teenagers and didn't know my dad was an adult. And then he immediately asked my brother to get out the car. We haven't been like, okay, what are we being pulled over for? Don't worry about it. Get out of the car. Dealing with that. And my dad is like losing it at this point because he's like, you're not going to do this. Like, I'm going to get out of the car. Like, I'll go to jail for this. But I wish I had the whole memory of exactly what happened after that. But it ended up de-escalating, and he pulled us over because there was the little tree hanging in the window, the air freshener, and then he said that we needed to change something like the license plate light was going out or something like that. But gave us a full hassle, shining the lights in, putting the foot on the door so my dad can't get out of the car, get my brother get out of the car without any real explanation of what we had done. That had just solidified it to me there that, and I'm like 9, 10 years old. Like, all right, this is real. Like, cops do not see me or my brother or my dad. They don't see us as anybody positive in the community.
Where can we make the biggest change as a country in how we treat others, especially minorities, especially men of color? Right now, the focus is on the police. and their brutality, oppression, quick triggers, all the things that we're seeing going on around the country that's been going on for a long time. It's just getting exposed right now because a lot of these things have been caught on video. But you as a young man, you're 27-ish?
27, yeah.
27. And you're married and you're going to have kids. And hopefully you're going to have healthy, strapping, athletic young boys and girls as well. What do you want for them that you didn't have or that you haven't had? And how can our country modify their thinking, modify their hearts, modify their behavior so that we can get there?
So I think the first thing that can make some sort of change here, the first step to making a change here in the United States with race relations, is probably just acknowledgement. It's always a thing where in our school systems, our education systems, that past, that evil American past, full of blood and slaughter and murder and all of that, there needs to be acknowledgement that that was a real thing. And America was built on that. And America was not all men are created equally. It was not that. It was certain men were created equally. And the thing is, like, women at the time weren't even created equally. So it's just when there's that acknowledgement that that's what it was, and even going into the systemic racism and things that have been put into place, like the war on drugs, things like that.
What do you think war on drugs was?
The war on drugs was really the war on blacks and hippies. It wasn't illegal to be a hippie, to be against the war. So harsh punishment on weed. That's what it was. So you can criminalize them. And then heroin was a drug that was used in the black community a lot. And there were very harsh penalties on drugs, on heroin. And then you also look at how harsh punishments were for crack cocaine versus cocaine, soft cocaine, like, that
powder.
People would powder cocaine. Thank you.
I've only done it a couple times.
But yeah, so like powder cocaine came with really, light punishment. And crack cocaine was primarily used in the black community. The punishment you would get for having a certain amount of grams on you of crack would be a hefty amount. So it's just very different punishments that you were going to see. And that went on throughout the 80s. And then the crime bill by Bill Clinton was just going to be tough on crime, 3 strikes. Some of those things were just really set up. And Bill Clinton admitted later on that it was wrong and it was something that was an issue and kind of used against the black community. It's just some of these things they're out there. It's public knowledge. And I don't think many people care to know about it, care to admit it, care to think about some of these things. And it just comes off like black people are the root of their problem and we're lazy and we're not fixing our community. It's just, it falls back on us. And it's like, well, there needs to be some help because there was no assistance. There was no real help after slavery. And that's that's a whole different topic there. It's just, I think that's the first step, is just the admission that there are race-related issues, and they're deeper than just what you see. They're deeper than what the media will tell you it is. It's much deeper. And when we do that, I believe in the good in people and the best in people. And I think that we all can come together and create things and pass bills or whatever we need to do to make the country greater and make it something where everybody can feel comfortable and equal. And also, I'm with the police. I like the police. It's like we need to be protected from those who do not have the best intentions for us. That's just one thing there.
Let's shift to the football arena. Mm-hmm. So predominantly 70% of the NFL are men of color. Mm-hmm. Did you experience discrimination in your football journey, or was that a safe haven?
For the most part, I would say it is a safe haven. Dealing with discrimination, and this is tough because it's tough. I would never want to say anything that would indict somebody or whatever. especially a lot of the coaches and people that I've ran into in my life and talked to, and the places I've been. When you're a part of a football team, it really is a group of guys who are all trying to achieve something, regardless of race, religion, anything. But yes, as far as I can remember right now, what I'm thinking right now, for the most part, I haven't had really any issues. It's always been something where I know if I had any issues with the police, especially when I was in Pueblo, going at csu-pueblo, I could call my head coach and let him know that there was an issue going on, or something was happening with the police or whatever, and he could be somebody who could speak up for me. Now,
so you had some protection a little bit,
right,
in college,
but at the same time, how deep is that? I'm not 100% sure. I was on the team, and I think that, like I said, the number one thing is winning in football. So as long as we're helping each other win, then great. But I still know that there are things where, if we're not wearing the same uniform, if we're not on the same team, it might not be the same energy that I'm getting from certain guys. And you understand that. Like I said, people come from all different type of backgrounds when it comes to a locker room. And you forget about those things and you go achieve a common goal. That's the beautiful thing about sports and about football. But it then does come to light, like where I'm going to, because even you look at the Colin Kaepernick situation and what was the stance prior to April, and now what is the stance after April, after the George Floyd situation? Where is the NFL stance? And that'll kind of tell you race relations in the NFL, and in football where it is. I feel like sometimes it only goes so far.
Well, here's one thing I love about sports, and you see it in the locker room. It's a melting pot of all different men from different creeds. Some guys love country, some are hard rockers, some are rappers. Mm-hmm. Everybody can come together in a common goal and be successful. Yeah. And there's something about football that allows you to you could even not even like your coach, not even like your quarterback, not even like the guy you're playing next to. But for some reason, when you get in the game, you put that behind you, mm-hmm. and you go on that mission it's we, not me, and you can be successful. But a lot of times when you walk out of the locker room, it's different.
Yeah.
So you brought up Colin Kaepernick. Let's talk about Colin Kaepernick. Mm. Did you understand when he did what he did back in 16? I think it was 16 when he started the kneel down during the national anthem. Did you understand exactly what he was doing?
Yeah, 100%. I think even right before that, because I think that was the season after I left Cleveland and Carolina in 2015. It was 2016. And I believe in 2015, getting ready to go to Cleveland, I remember there being plenty of players in Cleveland who were upset about, I don't want to mess this up, Freddie Gray. I think it was Freddie Gray who was in Cleveland, who was killed by the police in Cleveland. And there was plenty of guys on the team who were vocal and who were upset about that. Guys like Joe Hayden and Andrew Hawkins. I mean, just some of the guys who were leaders there on that team, they were really upset about that. Fast forward, I think what the difference was I don't know if it was Mike Brown or the Tamir Rice situation that happened I think it was Tamir Rice that happened in Baltimore. The whole thing was there were incidents. Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown. All those situations were happening. I think Philando Castillo was around that time too. So there was plenty of issues where I was seeing, and I'm watching it on TV, watching people riot in the streets and be upset about it. I thought it was something that was really honorable from Kaepernick to do that, and I think it was excellent. My dad was in the military. My dad was in the Army. So being a military brat and understanding, for him having the understanding to reach out to somebody like the Navy SEAL that he reached out to in order to kind of figure out what would be the best way to do this protest. Doing that, it meant a lot to me. And I said, that was a really great gesture from him. And it's smart because as a football player, he can't just score a touchdown or throw a touchdown and then take his helmet off and give a speech about police brutality. After he gets out of the locker room and he gets out of his jersey, his impact isn't as strong. But it's a very big impact when so many people are watching football on a Sunday afternoon and the national anthem is playing and there's a guy taking a knee. And people are going to go, why is he kneeing? Why is everybody else here standing and he's kneeing? Microphone's going to be in his face, camera's going to be in his face, and he has that platform now. And I thought it was smart. How everything happened after that, I can't really speak on. With the whole workout with him in the NFL and some of those things, I don't know what that was all about and how that went down, so I can't speak on that. But as far as the protests, I understood from the start what he was saying. I was agreeing with him, and it kind of made a lot of sense when all the football players were called sons of bitches if they didn't stand for the anthem. I think that kind of put it into perspective too of those who do not care about what Cap is kneeling for, and when they moved it to being about the anthem, and he very clearly was like, it's not. And I talked to a Navy SEAL who, laid it all out for me of how not to be disrespectful to the flag.
I think that's a much misunderstood time period because it's clear that Cap was protesting the treatment of blacks by our police. It's very clear. But it was framed that it was disrespect for the flag. And so us living in a military community with 5 bases and lots of friends and everybody, the chirping that I heard was, how could these athletes disrespect our flag? They weren't seeing the real issue. And I think that whether it was politicians that did it, whether it was whites that did it, whether it was the NFL that did it, I'm not sure. But the message didn't come through unequivocally that this was a police brutality issue.
Yeah.
And I think after the video of Floyd, it became very clear what Kaepernick did. And I don't think in my lifetime I've ever seen a guy so misunderstood get put back in a positive light overnight. I mean, less than a week, Colin Kaepernick went from being the villain to the hero. Mm-hmm. And I also think that a lot of institutions, a lot of white people also realized what was going on. And so we talked about it earlier today that, in MLK's I Have a Dream speech, he talks about police brutality and oppression 2 different times. Yeah. And I think that a lot of white people, because they're not treated like you have been, they don't have to look over their shoulder. They're not getting pulled over for no reason. They're not they're not suspected of things like you are when you go into a convenience store, you go into a clothing store. They don't get it. They don't get it. And so black people have 2 choices. They can take the approach of white people are stupid, or you can understand that because you can call it privilege, but because we're living in the environment that we're living in, we don't see it. Okay? And so until you have friends that are black and they share these stories, and that's why I'm doing this podcast with you and this interview with you, is just to bring some of this to light. When I was 9 years old, I never got pulled over by a cop. When my dad and my brother were driving around, we didn't get pulled over. So it's difficult to understand something you haven't experienced. So I think that when I ask you your stories, I think you need to share your stories. I think all the guys that have been discriminated against and mistreated need to share their stories. Because by virtue of sharing your stories, people can go, oh, that's not the life I had. That's not the childhood I had. That's not the experience that I had with the police. And then all of a sudden you increase the awareness. Yeah. And then people have a choice now to either empathize and understand or ignore. Right. And I think most people with a good heart that are intelligent are going to understand. So,
yeah, it's all about, like you said, empathy and kind of but it's hard for human nature. I get it. It's hard if it's something that's not necessarily an issue to you, and I get it. This is America. I 100% believe that if you really work hard and you really prepare yourself and you put yourself in the best situation, you can make something of yourself here. You can come here with nothing and become something. I truly believe that. And every kid who's in the poorest of neighborhoods around drugs and violence, you can still make something of yourself, and you don't have to be a ball player to do it either. You can really, you can apply yourself and do something and become something. But I do also understand. I mean, and that's like with saying that, just also having the knowledge to go, well, there are also things that are there that you cannot control. The variables that are there that you cannot control. Where if you put 8 out of 10 people in that situation, they are gonna fail. They're gonna fail at life because there's no libraries in their neighborhood. There's only liquor stores and drug stores. Gun stores in the neighborhood. So, just being able to understand that. And I wish that you could even, because you're a parent and you understand being a dad, just talking to really my mom. I think my dad doesn't vocalize it as much about, being worried about things. But if I could show you the text messages and the emails and some things that my mom will send me just because she's worried. She has 3 black sons. And the statistic is 1 in 3 is going to go to prison. So, and that's a real statistic. 1 in 3 black men is in prison. So, it's just, that's one of the things. So my mom will send me different emails, certain things like, hey, like, remember this, like how to deal with the cops when you're pulled over. Hey, be careful. She'll call me on a regular day. Hey, the cops are out. I see them all out. Just be careful. Drive safe. Don't put yourself in no position. So, and like I said, I know I've been harassed with my dad, and I've been harassed right in front of my mom as an adult by the police, and so she understands, and my dad understands. If I could have my mom like even voice it even more, because it hurts sometimes, and just seeing her kind of be so worried about things. I'm like, Mom, I'm good. I'm not a troublemaker. I don't do those things. I don't drink. I don't drink and drive. I don't smoke like that. I don't do none of those things. I don't do none of that. So I'm a good kid. But she understands it's not about if you're a good kid. Sometimes it's just running into the wrong guy.
So there's no question that we have systematic oppression and inequality, unfairness, suspicion. You can use the adjectives that fit between the police forces and black men, young black men. In your lifetime, where else have you seen discrimination that's systematic in your education, in the real world? Where else do you see that? Because it's not just in the police force.
Yeah, definitely in the school systems, 100%. There are certain curriculum that is taught. I'm not going to learn about. I didn't learn about any of the black history that I know. I didn't learn it in school. I learned that from my parents. I learned that from the books that we had in the house. The books for black people to understand their history, to understand what's been going on in our in America and how to maneuver things.
What's the biggest thing that you've learned through your heritage and through your parents that they didn't even cover in school?
The biggest thing I learned from them? Mm-hmm. Shoot. I think there's many. I guess one example would be something like the Black Panthers and how important it was to have that type of community leadership. People who came in who were going to protect the community the way that they did. And
for those listeners that don't know what the Black Panthers are, give us an overview of what the Black Panthers did. Yeah,
the Black Panther Party, I want to say they were started in Oakland. I don't want to mess that up, but I want to say that they started in Oakland. But just to protect their community, there was a lot of police that would come into the community and just harass, assault different people of the community. And the Black Panthers was just formed to be black men, black women who were armed. They were armed to the T, and understood their rights, and especially their Second Amendment rights, and vowed to take care of the community, start after-school education programs, would feed their children, would do different things to feed children, start lunch programs and things like that. But that was a group that was created, like I said, I want to say in like 60, 8 or so. Man, I may be wrong there. But yeah, the Black Panthers and how they came up, and then how they were also labeled public enemy number one in the United States by the FBI, or J. Edgar Hoover. FBI. He named the Black Panthers public enemy number one to America, and went through and dismantled that group of men who were there to protect the community. They infiltrated it and threw different people into the Black Panthers, and just took that organization down. And it is now something that is not really spoken of, and not spoken of in a positive light when it comes to American history and what the Black Panthers were. That's just an example, and that's some of the stuff, like, obviously my parents would teach me some of that stuff, but I would have to read about it myself. You know, some of the things that you just have to look at, and the criminalization of the black man, that's something that I didn't learn in school. That may be even greater than the Black Panthers, and how that started. I mean, you talked about it earlier today about the 13th Amendment and what that really meant, and how that had its little hidden agendas in there for, okay, the slaves are free, but we still need this slave labor. We can make you a criminal, and if you get charged with a crime, then you go right back to the plantation. So now, after the Emancipation Proclamation and, Happy Juneteenth today, if you're a free black man walking around, you could be arrested for loitering, vagrancy, arrested for things like that, and thrown right back on a plantation to work where you just left.
In chains.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it if that's what it was then we look at it what it is now, where there's mass incarceration, and there's so many black people in prison for some bogus charges. The fact that marijuana is an industry that is essential and was essential during the quarantine, and there are so many black men locked up because of marijuana. I mean, it's just, there's the criminalization of the black man in America. Not saying that, woe is us, like, oh, come on, like, we need all the assistance in the world. No, that's not it. You don't need a handout like that. Don't need all that. But for those to recognize and go, yeah, this has been pretty unfair for you guys, and it's a slap in the face every time somebody cannot acknowledge that and says, well, pick yourselves up by your bootstraps. Martin Luther King was one of the people who said to tell the black man to, like, pick themselves up by their shoestrings is just bogus, because you must not understand what it's been for us, and how we may not even have bootstraps. We weren't given bootstraps, so us to pick ourselves up by them is like, it's kind of moronic to say that.
NFL players have a platform. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the guys are speaking out through social media and through our network of people. What should young black men do who are the targeted audience? Mm-hmm. They're the guys that are being criminalized. They're the guys that are being targeted by the police. It's not 70-year-old black men. It's young men, black men. Mm-hmm. What can guys do in a peaceful fashion and an effective fashion to make more awareness, more not looking for sympathy, but empathy and understanding from the white community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it starts with education. Educate yourselves. I think there's too many black men walking around who are not educated on our history. I've always been taught from a young age, know your history, know what's going on, because history repeats itself.
It does.
So always know your history and where you come from. It's so important. And I think there's so many, like I said, black men who do not value that knowledge. We're too busy thinking about other things. So I think that's one thing. I think number two is I would stress to black men to always check your mental health and check the mental health of other black men. Because some of the things that I didn't grow up in the hood. My dad grew up in the hood. He seen somebody get murdered at 8 years old. 8 years old. You think he has PTSD from that? And there's so many others who have had worse situations than he did. So many black men and just people who live in impoverished communities who need that addressed, that mental part addressed. So that needs to be something that Black people need to do. Take care of your mental health, educate yourself. And the more we can do that, and when we start to see the change, when we start to see the change in how the police act towards us, when police officers start getting locked up for being bad cops and all the good cops are out, we need to make that unified effort to strengthen that bond. We have to do that, because there's just, and that goes for everybody. Because even you driving your car, if a cop gets behind you, heart starts racing a little bit more. You're going to get in trouble. I really truly believe once the police and the police department really views their job as helping the community and being a servant to the community and to a community that loves them and embraces them, we will see a huge change in how a lot of things go. So those are probably the three things. The knowledge, the education part will make it easier to trust a cop. I don't know. There's just certain things where we have to start learning our rights, educate ourselves, checking up on our mental health, and then really make a effort in trying to bring more peace between the police and the Black community when there are efforts made to help with that from the other side.
I would add to that, for people of all colors, that they become more friends. They gain more friendships with people that don't look like them.
Right.
Which will lead to more of an understanding that we're all the same.
Yeah.
And will also lead to better conversations about these issues, so that there's more of a solidarity between all people of all colors about inequalities, as opposed to the Black man advocating for the Black man.
Right.
And if you look at the protests that have been going on across the country, a lot of the people don't look Black to me.
Yeah.
Right?
All different
so you got people, right. So you've got a coalition, a rainbow coalition of people that are advocating for equality. And if we have equality for Black men, we're also going to have equality for women.
Yeah.
It will permeate through our society.
Yeah.
And if we don't have equality for Black men, we're probably not going to have equality for women and the other parties as well.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time today to kind of share your heart, give your perspective, share your experiences, talk about some tough issues. Yeah. I appreciate you, and I thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Craig. I appreciate you.
Right, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can follow us on our website, promindsetpodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.